I'm sure I mentioned this in the last video, but I have officially given my resignation to Marten. I had a ride along with me a week ago, and I sent an automated email out at the time that I started the shift on that Sunday because I finished my day on Monday. So I basically gave a 2-week notice, which supposedly is something that people don't normally do. They normally don't give a notice in the trucking world. They don't really just say, I'm not going to be there, or here's your truck, I'm out, or something like that. At least that's the way that some people online say. They say, oh yeah, don't bother giving a resignation. Just go in there and turn in your keys and that's it. This is probably the reason why Schneider was so quick to say, okay, well, no, you don't need to put in a 2-week notice. It works out better for the schedule if you basically call it when you get home and turn in your truck. So that was that. But what's interesting to me is that my email was not answered. Didn't reply to the email where I put in a resignation at all. Nobody in the office this last week seemed to know or say anything. So I'm assuming that that's because it's between me and the fleet manager. Maybe it's considered to be something that they'll find out on a need-to-know basis, or I'm not 100% sure. It's one of those very weird things to me where trying to decipher what the company, like, I don't know if it's just one of those things where who needs to know? Why does it? I mean, it's not like they're going to put on a board and say, this is his last day. It's like, it's interesting. So anyway, at the time of this recording, which I'm sure it's long after by the time you're watching this, it's going to be 2025. I'm recording this at the tail end of September, right after Hurricane Helene went through and destroyed Georgia, parts of Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, went through there. I will tell you this, working the Walmart account during that time is very interesting because some of the places that we would go to, like Franklin, North Carolina, were hit by the storm. Seneca, South Carolina was hit by the storm. I don't know. They're not communicating with us exactly to what degree they were hit. It could have been flooding, like a hole opened up in the roof and it flooded and they have to sanitize and clear everything out and make it safe and an appropriate fixes put into place. Or it could be that it flooded or was without power. Parts of North Carolina I know are underwater. I've seen a lot of people posting in online forums some stuff that's pretty scary that drivers are having to deal with. One video was a guy that was literally sitting in his cab, unable to move, and the water level had gotten up to the point where it's at steering wheel level. It's like he points the camera around the inside of his cab and he's underwater. I mean, he's like up to water, like at his neck. So things are floating around his truck. That's scary. So yeah, I feel really bad for, everybody that's having to deal with everything in North Carolina, plus all the drivers that are stuck on the road, plus all the people that are having to deal with the shutdowns and stuff like that. We're hearing all these different reports of people that are stranded without being able to get food and supplies. We're hearing stories about people trying to fly in on private helicopters to give supplies and to try to take people, rescue people, and being shut down by government officials saying, no, leave this to the pros. You're not to do this. If you do this, you'll be arrested. There are certain groups that are bringing in supplies to the people, and people trying to load up trucks to take over there are being stopped, and they're saying, well, if you want to participate, we have to check everything because it's got to be put through, I guess, a sanitary or something like that procedure to verify things before it's sent in there. Some people are saying it's just because the government wants to have credit for everything, bringing everything in. I don't know what the situation is. All I know, at this time at least, all I do know is that from a company perspective, I'm going to some of these Walmarts and seeing it in chaos because a lot of people bought a lot of stuff from the Walmarts, and their shelves had stuff bought out. Frozen and dairy, people, as you know, will buy meat, buy cheese, buy whatever they can, and then they'll put it in the fridge and freezer. They'll just stockpile up on food. The frozen pizzas in one store I went to the other day, it was as if they had put in a new cooler and it was completely vacant in that one cooler because there was no frozen pizzas at all. Even in the marketplace side, there was nothing there. It was kind of amazing. The fruit and vegetables and stuff, they were still quite a bit there, but people had just really attacked the frozen pizzas. But yeah, I mean the hurricane basically stopped deliveries to some places that were affected. So there were a couple times this last week as I was driving around unloading where I was given a load and I was told, like, for example, I was sent on my Monday, I was sent to Seneca, Clemson, and Anderson, but I was told Seneca cannot receive any of the load. They just I can't go there. So instead go to Clemson. Well, on the way to Clemson, which they were open, so was Anderson, but there was a 10-mile stretch where the power was completely out. And being that I drive at night, it was like 10:30, 11 p.m., maybe even later than that when I got there, and there was no power. There was no power to the traffic lights. Well, if there's a traffic light that's a four-way, that basically is flashing, you're supposed to treat it as a four-way stop. Well, if it's completely out, people are like, oh, okay, I don't need to stop for that because this not a four-way flasher. It's not a four-way stop sign, essentially. So I'm just going to barrel through it. So driving a CMV, if I saw headlights coming up from the side, I would slow down and see what they're going to do. If I got close to the intersection and they weren't deciding if they were going to pull out just yet, I would stop, even though I was on a major thoroughfare. Because even if I'm on a state or a U.S. highway and there's a side road coming up from one of the little side streets, still, you got to play it safe. You got to play it by the rules, which is them coming up and they would get a chance to go too. Even though it's in the middle of the night and there's only a few vehicles going on the main highways, you still got to play by the rules. But I tell you, some of these people would just pull straight out and go straight across a highway. I'm like, yikes. So got to definitely be careful of that kind of stuff. It's crazy. But with the power that was out in some of these places, and meaning that, like, for example, I couldn't drop off at Seneca. When I got to the Clemson, which is a neighborhood market, is the one I used to refer to as the neighborhood market that was completely in the dark. Well, about a month ago or so, they installed lights back there. So yay, now there's lights. It actually surprised me when we first went there. I'm like, I can see back here. It's amazing. I was having to use my brake lights and go as something to illuminate the dock. And as, you know, just a little bit, start, stop, dimming every single light on the inside of the cab as much as I could, so that way I could see back there as well as possible. But now it's fixed. But getting there, they had very limited room. And I said, okay, well, we have to move out these 10 pallets from Seneca in order to get to your stuff. And they're like, okay, so they were shifting that stuff all over the place. Then they had to get their own pallets out. Then they had to load up mine again. Then I got to Anderson and they had to move all of the stuff from Seneca again in order to load up everything again. Now, the procedure is a little bit different when you drop off a trailer, if it's loaded versus unloaded. If it's unloaded, you verify with the security that it's empty and they say, okay, park your empty in there. If there's something in there, they will tell you what lot they want you to pull into. If it was an unloaded truck or a trailer, because it had Seneca still on there, I had to seal it and then put it back on in the lot someplace and make sure that it's fueled up and ready to go in case it was just sitting there for a day or two or whatever. Obviously, also take it out of continuous mode and put it back into cycle sentry or start-stop mode, depending on if it's a Carrier or Thermo King. Mainly because you want to make sure that it's not constantly, it's using the insulation on the inside to keep the temperature regulated. And so that was kind of fun. You know, because that was one of two times. The second time, it was a bunch of C's. It was on my Wednesday, which was technically my Friday because I was taking 2 paid days off in this cycle because of my Thursday and Friday. Basically, I had taken paid days off because I wanted to make sure I got that before I left Marten. And I actually had scheduled the PTO and they did not pay my first day of PTO from last week, but I was told, all you have to do is just let us know how many days of PTO you want to cash in. I'm like, I could just cash them in. Thought about working it, but then I was like, no, I think I need to get some things in order before I hit the road. So I did. But the second time I hit a load that had to have stuff technically go to a store that was shut down, I was sent to, this is on my Wednesday, I was sent to Cleveland, then Cornelia, then Cleveland, and it was going on to Franklin, but Franklin shut down. So it was luckily in the nose of the trailer. So I didn't have to do anything there. No shuffling around. It was just deliver 4 pallets to Cleveland, 3 pallets to Cornelia, and 2 pallets to Clayton, all the C's. So it was obviously a meat trailer. And then the produce was all going to Franklin. Franklin normally only gets like 8 to 10 pallets. This time they had 20. But I couldn't deliver them. So obviously it was them trying to restock up, but and it was in there in case they happened to open up by the time that trailer went. If not, take it back. So I took that trailer back at the end of my day on my Wednesday and put it on the lot. So I'm really hoping that they're able to get these things restored. So I tell you, it's really interesting because talking to a couple other drivers about them being stuck while they were in the hurricanes. Like I came in after the hurricane. And so I talked to a couple other drivers as I'm waiting for loads or something like that, because the office is still chaos. They're still trying to figure out, this load came back because we can't deliver to that store. Okay, well, what can we give instead? And the lot's also at the DC filling up with trailers. And the trailers are filling up with things that you can't deliver. And so it's made it difficult sometimes for me to find my trailer because it's not in any of the major lots. I saw the yard jockeys moving empties into the Walmart fleet parking area, which is completely off of the yard because they had to move them somewhere. I guess they're filling up. And it's made it very difficult. Sometimes I've had to pull trailers into the very tight spaces that just you don't ever want to go into. I prefer to go into a regular full-size space or go into a space that has like 4 or 5. It's 4 or 5 wide if it's at the right kind of the night where there's only like a few trailers in the entire area and it's nothing but empty spaces. You know, obviously, if you don't have to do a precision back, then do it where you have plenty of room to just back up and I would say fling it in there, but it's not exactly that easy. Talking to some of these drivers though, they're telling me that like one guy was telling me that he was in Augusta when and Augusta was one of the areas that was hit by Hurricane Helene. And he said that power lines were at head height on the ground and you can't drive onto the oncoming side of the highway and pop up over the curb in order to get to where you're trying to go. But at the same time, you're kind of stuck until they lift up the power lines. And so they would call 911 and the 911's like, yeah, we understand. We just can't get out there. So he had to wait a couple of hours for the people to come and raise the power lines because he said, this is a safety thing. Anybody could drive into it and touch the power lines. And so that had to be raised before he could go. One driver went on that route all the way down to Waynesboro and then Statesboro and was on his way back when the roads started to flood up ahead. And so he had to pull over on one of the higher hills and just pulled over to the side of the road. He was going to go to a truck stop, but he was like, okay, well, I'm just going to pull over the side of the interstate. I don't think this is going to, or the state highway. He didn't think that it was going to be one of those things where anyone was going to say anything to him, because of where he was stopping, because the road was basically flooded ahead. Another driver, I can't remember if I said this last week or not. I can't remember if it was this week or last week he told me, but he said he parked in a parking lot. He pulled into the Walmart, he delivered, and then they would not, and then he was going to try to make it to a Love's, but that Love's was completely full. So instead he went back to the Walmart and parked in an area of the parking lot. But when he woke up, he parked on the side. When he woke up, the truck and trailer had gone about 6 feet. He says, I swear the truck and trailer must have moved 6 feet because I parked it up against the side under the areas of under the shade of the tree because where the sun comes up. I've been there before. He says, when I woke up, I was more slightly crooked in halfway over the parking spaces and part of the way into the drive area. He says, I swear I must have gone 6 feet, which I didn't feel. And I'm like, yikes, that's kind of scary. Imagine, I mean, I've seen floodwaters and stuff like that pick up trailers and move them, but you don't normally think about a semi that's still going to be touching the ground moving at all with only a little bit of water, because he said that the water that he observed when he went to sleep and when he woke up wasn't very high in that side of the lot. He picked one of the higher sides of the lot as opposed to one of the lower ones that would flood into, and he was hoping to keep it moving, but still, he says he swears that it moved him 6 feet. So, yeah, a lot of interesting things there. I dropped off at this one store that had gotten 3 fleet trucks dropping off general merchandise. They have the shared type of docks, so that way it's general merchandise and it's grocery. And they had just had 3 fleet trucks just completely drop off, completely clear completely out from all the craziness, and just drop everything in their loading dock, and they were not able to move all of it out. So when I showed up there, they kind of gave me a look and they said, "Are you frozen dairy?" I said, "Meat and produce." And they said, "Meat and produce? Guys normally don't come here until like 3 to 5 a.m. And I was there at 8:30 p.m. So they're just like, "Okay, come on in." And I'm looking, and it's like a maze. It's like turning to the side and wiggling between things. And the dock area was 4 deep, because they were trying to just move things. So they're like, "Yeah, which one are you pulling into?" I'm saying, "That one." They're like, "It's 4 deep." So they couldn't even move. So they had to clear out stuff in order to make a path that was about 6 feet wide to clear off just half of the loading dock. The one dock that I was in, basically, to clear that, so that way it could lift up and drop in. I was only dropping off a few pallets to them, but still they were just like, "Okay, we'll do our best." And it's just, these Walmarts, I feel bad because the employees are working extra time, on the ball, hitting it hard, doing their very best to try to just keep it going. And their loading docks are filling up with pallets, and they're trying to move them to the floor because people are just buying them out. Natural disasters, what can I say? So that's crazy. On the JB Hunt front, yay, rhyming. Because that was basically it. I was only out with Marten for 3 days, and I was sent 2 loads each day, and it was a noise ordinance load and pretty uneventful. It was just the craziness that was dealing with the aftermath of the hurricane and the craziness in the office. JB Hunt, I continue to receive notification from the onboard person, the person that's getting me ready to go to JB Hunt, getting all my background stuff. All my background is clear. All my paperwork is now clear, so I'm approved to join. It took a little while for them to verify my backup, previous employment, and that kind of stuff. The recruiter I haven't talked to in a few days, because the onboard person is kind of the person who's taking the lead on that. The biggest thing I was waiting for is to talk to a manager, because I had questions about compensation during training. Well, they pay a certain amount for watching those 5 videos. And they said that part of what I'll be doing on my first day in is I'll be going in, doing my start paperwork and familiarizing myself, watching some videos about orientation, that kind of stuff. And then within the first couple of days, they're going to be done with that process and getting me hired. And then they're going to be entering me. I'm going to be running loads with a trainer who's going to be with me. They're going to be putting me through they said training it's kind of like an obstacle type course to make sure you are trained the right way to navigate the narrow lanes of the rail yards, because they can be tight. So they want to make sure we're trained the right way. So it sounds to me like there's a process that they're going to put us through to make sure we are trained the right way, because, different backgrounds could be anything. You could be trained and then not trained again, and they want to make sure that we're trained properly before we hit the road. The manager I spoke to, finally, it was like pulling teeth trying to get a manager to give me a call, because their process and procedure is that they don't call you until 48 hours before you come in. Well, technically, today is Friday. I go out with Marten for my third to last night tonight, but I only just got off the phone with the manager, because when I get off the clock on Monday, I'll be reversing my sleep schedule back today to go to work for JB Hunt. Technically, I'll be starting at 4 p.m. and driving overnight and finishing around 4 a.m. and be driving until 6 p.m. I asked if I could start at 11 p.m. or 10 p.m. and they said, "We normally start you as early as midnight if you want to." I said, "Well, midnight's fine, because, that would mean that I would finish at like 2 in the afternoon. I could still maximize my hours. I like the idea of driving some of my shift, not during rush hour, and then hitting the major cities at rush hour, and then driving after it all, so that way I could have an opportunity to clear the road. So if I got stopped by morning rush hour, I could still drop off the trailer or whatever, pick up whatever it is, start to get out of the city, and then shut down in the early afternoon, which you guys know I love doing from Schneider, and it's never been an issue with Marten. But that to me sounds great. They said we can start you as early as midnight. Does that work? I'm like, yes, I'm not a solar powered truck driver. I don't need to do that. So that's wonderful to me. It sounds to me like they're being very accommodating so far. He was very happy to explain the questions. The questions I had, there's not really a dress code other than they'll give me a uniform that I'll end up wearing, and I'll go through that procedure when I first start there. The trucks are going to be internationals or Freightliners. They do not have APU, so they will be quieter. They'll probably have an opti idle or some sort of a start stop if the power gets low, and they'll probably run me through that procedure. I do remember it from the Schneider days. And that's going to be fine. I won't have to deal with the constant right behind me of a reefer, nor will I have to deal with an APU idling right behind me too, unless the reefer is built into the intermodal thing that I'm moving, the trailer I'm moving. But I don't know about that. I guess we'll deal with those if it's even something that we will have to deal with. So for the most part, talking to them, he answered my questions. There is compensation that is going to be for the training process. They give me some for watching the 5 hours of videos, then going in and dealing with, watching the videos that they have me do there. And then there is some sort of compensation that they'll do until I'm sent loads. But they train also with a trainer that will be joining me and running me through the procedure as I'm running loads. So that way I'm still going to be compensated for it, but I'm running them. So that's good. That's going to be good. That way I'm going to be running it. And they said that you basically will be going at your own pace. If the trainer says, no, you're ready to go within 3 days, or if you need to have additional time. That's one thing that I've run into with Marten is they're not doing as well as they used to. When I first started, they put me through a few days of training, 2.5 days of training. And the last day was Walmart specific, but they're not doing that training anymore, as I understand it. I talked to the office about that this last week at Marten, and they said, yeah, we don't really do the onboard training anymore. We send someone out with to do a ride along, and we kind of teach you what you need to know. But I've talked to a couple of drivers that have seen me at the fuel islands, and they'll ask me basic questions, not knowing some of the basic things that were covered on the ride along. I said, did you not do a ride along? They're like, no, I didn't do a ride along. Or they told me that they did a ride along, but the driver, the mentor that took him out didn't really cover a whole lot. I'm like, you're not really setting your drivers up for success. It sounds to me from talking to the manager that JB Hunt will be setting me up for success with proper training, which is good. I do appreciate that. So anyway, that's the latest with regards to me and finishing up with Marten. I only have 3 days left with Marten. I will do an update before I start with JB Hunt. So at the end of my 3 days, I will do an update. And JB Hunt, because I live farther than 40 miles away from the terminal, I will be going in for daily training. So every single day I will go out with them, and then they'll send me back to a hotel. So I'll probably do daily updates and talk about each day of the JB Hunt training while I am there. And then I'll jump back into my weekly updates, which is what I've fallen into. So we'll see what happens, because if I'm going to be in my hotel room, not doing anything overnight. I mean, obviously, if I'm put in with a roommate, I'm probably not going to be able to do that. I'm going to be, at the mercy of whoever I'm stuck with. Like, if it's like with Schneider, where my roommate was just loud constantly, I'll not like it very much. And I may escape and try to find myself pulled away to the side to see if I can go somewhere else for some area. I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes, I guess. But for right now, that's the latest. Thank you for watching.